Welcome to MSUA's Game Changers Live, where we speak with satellite and mobile connectivity thought leaders about industry trends, new technologies, and share what you need to know about where satellite technology is headed in the future. I'm your host, Lisa Dreer. Today, our guest is Joe Spytek. He's the CEO of Speedcast. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
Great. Thanks so much for joining us today. Maybe we can start by just having you give the audience a little bit of background about yourself.
Sure. Easy enough. I thought we were going to start with our almost technology fail again here. This has been, I guess, our second try, but I'm really excited to speak with you today. So thank you very much for having me. So quick background on myself. Joe Spytek, like I said, CEO of Speedcast. And Speedcast, for those of you who don't know, is one of the largest satellite integrators, probably the largest and most diverse satellite integrators in the world. And we serve 5 kind of key customer segments, or core constituencies, as I like to call them. The first is our commercial maritime division, which is probably kind of the beginnings of Speedcast some time ago. We have a cruise, ferry, and a yacht division, an energy division, an enterprise division, which is everything from kind of IoT to telco, bit of a catch-all. And then we have a government division, which serves, really government customers and NGO customers. Myself, I am, I guess, an engineer by training and an entrepreneur by sort of spirit and by career. I've lived and worked around the world a fair bit. I know this industry kind of from the ground up. I started in the mid-90s. It's really the only industry that I know. I've built a couple of companies in the space, and I joined Speedcast in late 2019 as a board member, and then took over as co-CEO, and then now as our long-term CEO for the business. So very, very excited to be here. Thanks again.
Absolutely. Well, so we invited you here today to talk a little bit about where are things headed for the satellite industry, and especially when it comes to mobile applications and things like that. So maybe we can start by just having you talk a little bit about what you think is the most important role that the satellite industry is playing in the future of mobile connectivity.
Oh, wow. I think that's pretty easy. I think satellite really provides the only way to create a really, truly ubiquitous cloud of connectivity on a global basis, right? So that essential fabric that's required to cover the entire globe. Terrestrial services are great, obviously, but they just can't cover everything. So you're going to have some blend of terrestrial and satellite to do it, to really create that truly global area network that our customers kind of require. So I think as an industry, we need to decide how we're going to kind of play in that space, right? I think in the past, we've chosen to kind of stick to our knitting, stick to kind of satellite-based services, either in remote areas or parts of the world, or with customer constituencies that absolutely had to have satellite because they had no alternatives. But my personal opinion is that we have to think more along the lines of convergence and play well with other technologies, including mobile technology. So I think that's the next phase of sort of this convergence effort. I like to think at Speedcast, we're starting to progress that, and we're taking that one step further. Really because we have to. I mean, I think that's what our customers are requiring of us. So the first step in that process is we're developing what we're calling a unified global remote, which it's starting off as an SD-WAN implementation that allows us to kind of access different topologies, multi-orbit, different types of technologies. That should evolve. We're hoping that evolves into a true software-defined modem. Now, that's going to take the balance of the industry to kind of get on board with this. But I think that's the absolute trend. That's what really has to happen to bring us truly, forward to that software-defined networking kind of panacea, if you will, to allow that true convergence to happen. So any orbit, I like to tell our team, I know this is a little bit strange and pedantic, but from smoke signals to optical satellites, and anything in between, right? We need to be able to access any of those technologies because, I think it maintains relevance, but that's what allows that true convergence, as I spoke to before. So that's kind of the biggest I see. So I think we're thrilled to play a small part in that, in progressing that kind of technology evolution and bringing the industry forward.
Do you think that making those moves and adding those new capabilities and technologies is going to make satellite communications and connectivity more accessible for new users and, I guess, use cases?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think there's still a couple technology jumps that need to happen. Certainly on the technology. I'm sorry, on the antenna side, technology side, to really access everything and do it in a very simplistic way. It's still complex, right? There's still a lot of standards. There's still. It's still not simple, right? It still is. That's why it's so important that there's integrators in the middle to kind of bring it all together. I think there's a number of steps that have to happen to really kind of get there. But I think the trends are there, and I think some of the initiatives that have kind of happened in this kind of COVID environment we've just gone through have accelerated some of those trends. But the antennas are the big thing I think that are going to have to progress in order to be really low cost and accessible to more and more users. And there's been some advances, but I don't think we're quite there yet.
Right. So I guess that kind of leads into what I wanted to talk about next. And I think you're kind of going down that path, which is, what do you see as some of the most significant changes that will happen in the satellite industry over the next year or two?
Next year or two might be bringing it forward a little bit, but I think certainly in the next couple of years, you're going to see some just dramatic changes, right? So I already mentioned, I think the SPAC boom, let's say that, maybe the boom is done. Maybe it's not, certainly not the SPAC bust, but, I think the SPAC boom has kind of enabled a lot of financing that might have not otherwise happened. And that's okay. I think some new businesses are out there that are kind of pushing the envelope in terms of technology. Lots of new business models are out there kind of being tested. There's probably some distortions to the overall market. So that's kind of the first step. The second, I think you're going to see the legacy operators really being pushed by these new entrants and probably having serious thoughts about what they do next, right? Whether there's going to be horizontal integration or a vertical integration in particular markets. I think everyone's preparing for this kind of coming glut of capacity with the multi-orbit stuff coming on, online with mPOWER next year. Although LEO is probably in the next couple of years. That's why I said the next 12 to 24 months is probably a little bit short, but certainly the next couple of years. I think you can't ignore the Starlink effect. I was out there in Hawthorne a couple of weeks ago, seeing what they're doing, and they're really innovating so fast. And what I was told, this latest launch kind of completes the constellation so they can have a go-to-service market, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. So I think that's got everybody thinking. It's showing how quickly, if you bring those innovation cycles down and you innovate faster, you can move pretty quickly. So I think that's got everybody a little bit, nervous and excited and about the future. I think COVID has also brought a little bit of what I like to, an efficiency cycle or an outsource cycle. We see that in a lot of our industries that we serve. The energy industry in particular, every time they go through a downturn, we have, oil prices drop, they build new efficiencies into their operations. And we're seeing that quite dramatically in the cruise industry right now, which has never really been through a downturn, but COVID was a dramatic downturn for them. So, a lot of employees were let go. I think they're hesitant to bring a lot of these employees back. And so therefore they're going into an outsource cycle and an efficiency cycle. And that, it happens across a number of industries. So that's, I think, another thing that's sort of accelerating that change. So these companies are, wondering how and working to utilize technology to kind of build those efficiencies into their operation. So I think it's a great time to be a value-added integrator. It's a great time to kind of be thinking about this as a thought partner with our customers. So it's pretty exciting, but it's going to be an interesting couple of years for sure. No doubt about it.
Yeah, no kidding. So with your background, having been in the satellite industry for so many years, one of the things that you've really witnessed is this evolution to the commercialization of space. Yeah. How do you see this impacting the satellite industry?
Well, I think there are threats and opportunities. I think first is because it's moved so fast, better, cheaper, everything, right? Again, you're sort of accelerating those innovation cycles and moving faster. So things are just going to get more and more cost effective. So that's great. I think private launch has been just an amazing boom. Just look at what's happened, to launch with all these new entrants coming in and enabling more and more assets to be put in orbit very, very quickly. And again, to sort of test and measure very quickly. I think if you look at advances in imagery and sensors, that's already fairly mature. They're talking about putting supercomputers in space now. If you look at what Amazon and Azure are doing in partnerships with Starlink and obviously with Kuiper with Amazon, getting closer to the customers and putting more intelligence on the satellites again, because when you're designing something for a shorter lifetime, you can afford to do that, and you can take risks in doing that. And I harken back to, it has to be 20, 25 years ago now. I remember when the first in-orbit kind of routing was done on a commercial basis, and it was a partnership with Cisco, and I forget one of the major operators that was doing it. And when you're spending $400 million plus to launch a 15-year asset, you get very, very nervous about making any changes. But now it's no problem. I mean, they just do it all the time. So, look, I think it's done great things for the industry. I am concerned about some of the regulatory and governance issues that are not yet fully formed, and maybe kind of racing ahead like this is good. You're sort of pushing the envelope, but that's what's missing, I think, from all of this. And I think you see some of the legal challenges to companies that are moving a little bit faster than others. I'm not sure that'll slow it down, probably not, but it's going to be interesting to see. To me, that's the kind of the missing piece. What's going to happen on the regulatory front, especially with the new. I hesitate to call it nationalism, but there's certainly a little bit of parochialism, I guess, in the world right now, and how other countries are going to acquiesce or not to some of these advances and what's going to happen there. So that's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out too.
Yeah, and when you talk about space, right, you end up talking about the globe, right? Everybody, everywhere, and yeah, there's I guess some complexity that comes into.
Yeah, and what happens if something bad does happen? If you have an in-orbit collision and you literally, I don't say you destroy, but you render it unusable, an entire orbital plane would be a real disaster. There's already been some near misses, and there's nothing up there yet, for God's sakes, compared to what's going to happen. I mean, the Chinese have just discussed recently a 60,000 satellite LEO constellation. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of orbital planes, but you've got to be able to get through it. It's going to be like that movie WALL-E, right? When I don't know. To me, that's what's yet to come, and it's going to be interesting to see how the regulatory environment plays catch up.
Yeah, no kidding.
But
So
certainly the advancements are really, really exciting, and it's kind of fun to watch. And we, again, as Speedcast, as an integrator, we get to pick and choose, right, and do what's best for our customers. So for us, it's all good.
that's great. When you think about the satellite services and solutions that the end users are going to be using, and I'm talking, business users or government users, what are some of the criteria that they need to be thinking about as they, put a plan in place for using satellite connectivity solutions?
I think, look, right now, you probably don't want to bet on a winner or a winning technology, right? You want to stay fairly flexible. So I think flexibility is probably number one. I would say sort of trying to come up with a solution that's relatively future-proof, because things are going to change, as we talked about. Change is going to accelerate, and things are going to start happening even faster, which is good. But if you go in there and you're betting on a particular technology, this is kind of, we've seen this before, maybe not on this scale, but really understanding what's coming in the future and making sure you don't get locked into a particular solution, I think is quite important. And then I think a big missing piece too that people often lose sight of, and it's obviously top of mind now for a lot of folks, is security and cybersecurity in particular. Networks in general are a vector, for cyber criminals and cyber disruptions. And the satellite industry is no different. We've got to be super careful about kind of managing that security piece. So those are the three things I think that are probably most prominent and come to mind for me. But again, it's a good time to be a customer here, right? It's a good time to be on that side of it for sure. Sorry, it's there are a lot of options, so choose your options wisely, I guess. And use your integrator, right? So choose an integrator can help make those decisions for you. So a bit of a shameless plug for the integration layer of the industry here. So.
Sure. Well, makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at the new technologies, what are some of the new technologies that the users need to be aware of and start, I guess, researching and understanding?
Well, we mentioned LEOs already. I mean, you couldn't you can't have this conversation with talking about LEOs. And I think customers really do need to understand, the benefits of LEO. Certainly there are many, but also the potential, not downsides or risks, but just what you actually have to do. Because right now you still, at least until antennas, the ESAs and FPAs come into form, you have to have multiple antennas kind of dual tracking antennas. So if for our customer sets, sometimes at the higher end of the value chain, a cruise ship or an energy platform or rig or support vessel, where real estate is not necessarily at a premium, we can put multiple antennas. But as LEOs, right now we're doing that in MEO, and then it's going to come down to LEO. They have to move pretty quick, and you'll have outages and failures, and you have to see a fairly significant portion of the art, And I don't think that's coming out of the marketing literature, right? People just don't realize that, I'm just going to take one of these small antennas, stick it on there, and it's going to work perfectly. So there's going to be use cases that are challenged that don't necessarily work right out of the box with the LEO solution. So there's a fair bit to think about when doing that. So you want to be careful you don't bet on a winner. And I actually see the kind of multi-orbit technology as an augmentation to what's already up in orbit. Maybe it'll be that GEOs are kind of augmenting the LEOs and MEOs, but I definitely see a way that they're gonna work together. And we have a lot of untested business models out there too, which is going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I've already mentioned antennas, but absolutely critical to making all this work. And a lot of very, very super smart people and great minds are working on this. But the electronically steered phased arrays and flat panels in general that can do all that switching that we just talked about electronically, make before break, is going to be critical. But of course, you lose something when you go to flat panel antennas. You lose that efficiency of a parabolic antenna, which you just simply can't get back. And then I think, I mentioned it at the onset, software-defined networking is going to be key to making all this work. There's a lot of complexity here that obviously the people designing the systems understand, but the users, may or may not. So, and I don't think that's really caught up yet. So there's going to be a lot of, implementation challenges here that I think software-defined networking on the remote side will help us solve. So those are, I think, some of the keys to realizing the full potential of this, this convergence that's happening. But yeah, but all three are they're not done yet, right? They're not set in stone, so they're still somewhat challenged, but it's coming.
Yeah. So how do you see that software-defined networking in supporting the use of, I guess, different constellations and in different orbits and things like that? Will that help? What will that help from a user perspective?
Well, they won't have to make the decisions themselves, right? So once you get the remote that we kind of talked about, and again, I'm using our examples, but others are doing it too, right? It's not just kind of a Speedcast thing, but so our unified global remote right now, it's SD-WAN based, and it's taking inputs from that are kind of pre-programmed, if you will. But pretty soon you'll be able to build a fair bit of intelligence into this, and we're starting to do this too with what we call TrueBeam 2.0. So we have some networks that have lots of coverage. There might be, say, the Med will have 40 or 50 beams covering a particular region, and if you just use kind of the software that's inherent in the platforms, sometimes silly decisions are made. If there's rain fade at a teleport, it'll move everything to a particular beam, but it does it manually, and then you sort of have to manually switch it back. We can take all of those inputs, put them into an AI engine. You can take cruising routes. You can take nav data from vessels. You can take historical nav data from vessels. You can take not only kind of rain and weather information at teleports on the teleport side, but also on the customer side. And we're doing that already, but in a fairly kind of simplistic way. But you can obviously drive that all with intelligence engines and AI engines to kind of make that much, much more intelligent, much smarter. And then the list goes on, I think, with what you can add to it. But I think, and then roaming between different topologies as well. A simple use case now is obviously when we get near shore, and we do this in the fjords of Norway, right, with some cruise vessels, because they're so high latitude-wise, and we're using geosynchronous satellites that are over the equator. We don't have the look angles to get to a satellite, so we have to use a terrestrial solution for that portion of the voyage. So we set up terrestrial connectivity, but those decisions, that all has to be done in real time. The customer doesn't want to be making those changes. So, we have to build that technology and build that kind of intelligence into the remotes to do that. So you can see right now it's roaming between terrestrial networks. Then maybe when the first iterations of LEO come, but they don't have full global connectivity. They just have, near shore connectivity. You could roam to a LEO, and when you get further offshore, you could roam to a GEO or a MEO. So building all of that in is critical, and we're doing that. We're starting to do that now. So I think that's going to be kind of critical to making it all work.
That's really exciting. I'm so excited to see how this all kind of starts to come together and gel.
Yeah.
So, Joe, I really want to thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing your insights about satellite mobile connectivity. And we really look forward to having you on the show again soon.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Okay. We also want to take a moment to thank the Mobile Satellite Users Association for hosting these sessions. To learn more about how to become a guest on Game Changers Live, become a member of the MSUA, or get our weekly newsletter, Satellite Mobile News, go ahead and visit msua.org. And we will see you next time on MSUA's Game Changers Live.